to Jake and Trev Review Everything.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Trev. And today we're going to review Robot Jox.
Two champions.
It isn't over until someone wins.
At war with each other.
Kill it! I have already killed you.
Two invincible men.
Let's finish it, Alexander, here now.
The ultimate killing machines.
I'm gonna get in this thing, and I'm gonna kick your...
Robot Jox.
Robot Jox is set in the far-flung future following a nuclear holocaust, and those that survive have built themselves into a civilization once again, deciding to outlaw war. That was easy. But now that war is outlawed, they still have to settle territorial disputes in some fashion, and they've chosen through the arena of giant robot fighting.
The East, or the Confederation's best pilot, Alexander, has been defeating the West, or the Market, their pilots, 9 times, and it's up to Achilles, their best pilot, to stop Alexander from winning the Robot Jox tournament and taking over Alaska.
Alaska, big deal. It is big.
Now, this movie has been on our hit list for a little while. It's been something we've been hoping to eventually do for the show, so we're kind of both excited to be here for this one. And it's interesting because there's been a lot of buzz kind of generated on the internet recently because of Pacific Rim, the Guillermo del Toro picture that's going to be coming up later here in the season. And a lot of people are comparing Pacific Rim to Robot Jox.
Is that Robot Jox isn't really anything near at least what we've seen in the trailer of Pacific Rim.
Yeah, it's hard to say now, but we'll see.
Robot Jox is a man-to-man combat movie with giant robots that are manned by man. And the Pacific Rim movie looks more like...
You know, like a Japanese kaiju monster versus giant robot mechs. Which is great and, you know, something very different. At best, I think Robot Jox is kind of supplying half of the formula for Pacific Rim, and it really wouldn't get anywhere without the Godzilla's kind of stuff. So
we're not really going to compare the two in this review, so if that's what you're looking for, sorry, but it's probably already been done anyways.
So Jake, what did you think about Robot Jox?
What I thought about this movie... I think that it is a fun movie overall. I saw this movie when I was about 8. I had it on VHS. It was robots fighting robots. That's awesome.
It's awesome!
But revisiting it now, the age that I am now, which is not 8 on the outside, it really has a lot of plot points that conflict with each other. Sometimes the movie is more serious and maudlin, when other times it's more lighthearted, more uplifting message. Overall, the plot of the movie is really light. It's not a very heavy fare, and it's a movie divided amongst itself. So I would recommend a watch of this movie. It's fun if you like giant robots. The robot design's pretty cool and stuff like that, but overall, it's not the best movie ever, so...
What you have here is a movie that's just so mediocre, I don't think anyone's going to leave truly satisfied. The depictions of the world in the far-flung future are there, but there's not enough of them. There's great special effects and practical special effects in this movie, but there's not enough of them.
Pity, ain't it?
So yeah, everything really comes across to me as being half done and half completed and half-assed. So that's how I feel.
So if you want to see this movie...
Spoilers incoming!
Alexander is the representative of the Confederation, who is basically the USSR.
Right.
And Achilles is the representative of the Market. So they basically have to fight each other over land in a Risk-style game.
Risk. win the game, and you win the world.
It's basically robots fighting in arenas in front of people for territory around the planet. And the main conflict in this movie is Achilles and Alexander fighting over Alaska. And
lots of oil, lots of timber. It's a valuable resource in the far-flung future, even more so than now.
Oil, timber, minerals. The goddamn Eskimos.
So of course Russia wants to the Confederation really wants to get its mitts on it, and of course the market can't allow that to happen.
Right.
And the second story that we have is the story of Athena. She's one of what are called the genetic jocks, or gen jocks.
Human beings, genetically engineered to be the best fighters in history.
There's this idea that they're sort of playing with. They never really come out and deal with it. But it's the robot jocks are obsolete. The regular human fighters are obsolete.
They do all right against each other. Never gonna be jocks, though.
Athena is one of these TUBIES, as they call them throughout the film, and she's the up-and-coming warrior among the gen jocks, and she's kind of going to take Achilles' place, is how they're setting it up. And she has a sort of infatuation with him. He has sort of an infatuation with her.
She falls into the love interest category in this movie.
Oh no, sounds real romantic.
But it's a really strange kind of story in terms of love affair. I don't know if they even share like a genuine, real kiss moment at any point. There was something.
They do.
It was just really awkward.
It was really awkward because she was like writhing in pain, and he's like, "I want to kiss your face." And the third storyline is between Tex Conway, a former Robot Jox, and support staff for Achilles' team, as well as Dr. Matsumoto, who is also one of the support staff.
Yeah. Tex Conway sort of has a manager function, sort of a future Jimmy Hart, if you will.
When you're talking about prime time, you're talking about me.
He's a real stereotype, just a good old Texas, down-home, good old boy, real boss hog, and so they're really trying to set him up to be your all-American, he's one of the good ones.
Save it for my eulogy, Roscoe.
And Dr. Matsumoto is actually kind of set up. He's very silent throughout the movie about what he's doing. His primary function is to create and set up the new weapons in the Robot Jox.
The conflict here is that there's the Confederation seems to be aware of what the market's big weapon for the next fight is going to be. So they're always ready for the next fight, it seems, and so there must be a spy, someone who's letting them in on it, and of course, who better to be the weapons engineer, Dr. Matsumoto?
No one. Me.
Now, examining the main plot of Robot Jox, there is an immediate feeling of familiarity that comes up, and there's a good reason for that. It's because we've seen this story before, with Rocky IV. In Rocky IV, we have the story of Rocky, of course, and Ivan Drago. Now, in the beginning of that movie, Ivan Drago kills a friend of Rocky's, Apollo Creed. In this movie, Alexander immediately kills Hercules, a friend of Achilles. And so there's immediately a grudge that comes up. It's very personal, but of course they're also sort of fighting a philosophical fight as well, the East versus West. And of course, as the story goes on, there are a lot of people who are trying to convince Achilles that he should do it, a lot of people that are convincing him that he shouldn't continue and pursue this fight.
What do you know about it?
It isn't over until somebody wins.
Why can't you change your thinking?
Because I'm a fighter.
You can't win!
And, of course, at the end, there is a big reconciliation.
We can both live!
If I can change,
Я думаю, что каждый тоже изменился
and
сегодня.
you can change,
Вы можете измениться.
everybody can change.
And these common elements are found in both stories. And what's interesting is that in Robot Jox it's less effective, even though it has every reason to be more effective. The biggest thing, of course, is that the stakes are higher. In Rocky, there was just a philosophical thing. They really weren't fighting for the actual East versus West outcome. It was all just kind of an up-here fight.
In here, there were two guys. killing each other. But I guess that's better than 20 million.
But in this, it really is for the stakes of the world. Millions of lives theoretically depend on these fights.
We cannot allow the Confederation to occupy 1 square inch of American soil.
And so the drama should be even more intense here, and it isn't.
Hey, whose side are you on here?
Now, where the similarities end between Rocky IV and Robot Jox are where the problems begin. Alexander, in the beginning, is fighting Hercules, and he wins, and Hercules is disabled, and the refs tell him to stand down.
Alexander, hold your position.
And he just goes ahead and steps on him anyways. So you are told in the beginning of the movie that he has major bloodlust, and it's not just for winning for his side of the world, it's winning personally for him, which is a difference between him and Ivan Drago, who in Rocky IV is actually just fighting for the USSR as a boxer and as a blood sport. When he kills Apollo Creed, it's more on accident because he's giving him his full force in the boxing ring.
Drago averages 1,850 pounds. Whatever he hits, he destroys.
Whereas Alexander kills Hercules just because he can, pretty much.
You're next!
Achilles!
So in the end of the movie, when they reconcile, the problem is that Alexander doesn't really have a motivation to reconcile, because in Rocky IV, Ivan Drago does, because he's just a man and he realizes that he shouldn't have to be the symbol of his country. He's just a man, Rocky's just a man.
He's not a machine, he's a man!
In this movie, it's almost in reverse, where you have Alexander originally having personal motivations, but then becoming more human or something, giving up his bloodlust or whatever. It's very confusing, and it doesn't really work in this sense.
I think another big difference between Rocky and Robot Jox for the end is that in Rocky there was constant cutaways to all the people watching at home, around the world. There were a lot of eyes on this, and so it became very symbolic to all those people. And in Robot Jox, they don't cut away once they start fighting to like the control rooms or to a world stage or anything. So there's not even a sense that anybody's even watching this fight happen.
And it don't matter. None of this matters.
And we're shown earlier in the movie that there are spectators watching this, and they don't really matter all that much.
None of this matters.
300 of them are killed while they're watching a match, and that's used as motivation for Achilles to quit because he feels so bad about them dying.
All I want is there won't be any bleacher bums. Clear the area.
We already thought about getting rid of the spectators anyway after...
So the second storyline in the movie involves another main character, Athena.
My name is Athena.
They set these genetically bred characters up to be so important to the program.
They're the future, whether we like it or not.
And at some point, they, in order to determine who should be the next Robot Jock, they have to fight each other over this silver pipe jungle gym structure to make it to the top.
And with that whistle, the climb up Boulder Canyon begins. Scotia looks to be a little bit dismayed by the venomous vapors. The Banshee almost missed that first actuator. And with the global Dutch gold medal on the line, the perfect game on the line for Rami in purple, climbing all the way up the track. The rocks have tumbled. The smoke is smoking. The snow falling like a blizzard on the ice wall. Rami at the top looks to be punching in first. A perfect game! A perfect game for Israel's Rami!
And you're thinking, why are these people genetically bred, specifically, probably with a lot of taxpayer money, to be Robot Jox if you're just going to put them through this danger room where they're going to end up dying anyways?
You gotta try and get to the top without breaking your neck.
And so we see the rise of Athena as she completes this obstacle course. She finishes the aggro crag in first place, and so she becomes then the love interest for Achilles, and it just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They don't really have any chemistry. There's a few scenes where they kind of look at each other from afar and give little coy looks and little happy smiles as having seen one another. But when they talk to each other, it's like there's an alien and a human trying to talk to each other for a first time.
So you're not human?
I am human.
They don't understand each other's mindsets.
Teach me how to love.
Right, and, the point where you think that they're going to, finally get down and get into the makings out, she just kind of injects him with a sedative and takes his place out of the Robot Jox fighting.
And Athena is also the reason that Achilles becomes a Robot Jox again, because Athena is going to take his place instead. It seems kind of weird because if any of the other Tubies had become the Robot Jox pilot to fight Alexander, he would have been totally cool staying in retirement instead of avenging the 300 people that got killed.
What do you fight for? Did you fight for?
And after she manages to sedate Achilles, she goes and pretends to be him and takes over the Robot Jox. And rather than, just her really being determined to go out there and give a good show and to defend her country, instead she starts laughing maniacally as she's plowing her way out of the hangar bay to get out there and fight. And this whole maniacal thing it comes completely out of left field. And, I guess it was probably intended as an indictment against these Robot Jox from the future, these Gen Jox, that they really don't have what it takes because they lack the fundamental humanity to do the job.
Maybe what they needed was a little dose of fear.
Fear?
Yeah. You heard of it?
Yes, but I don't see how that could help.
That is why you fail.
And so it's clear that they really didn't know what to do with Athena, as evidenced in the actual end of her story. After having fought her way out of the hangar bay for the Robot Jox and taking Achilles' place, she fights Alexander for a little while and is totally outmatched. She gets her ass knocked out hard, and Achilles has to swoop in and kind of save the day. She gets medevaced out of there, and that's the end of her story. She may be dead and paralyzed, she may just be knocked out, we don't know, and we never will know.
None of this matters.
And we'll never find out why the Gen Jox have those rat tails.
And for the third story, we have Tex Conway, the manager / ally of Achilles. Right at the get-go, he has no subtlety to him whatsoever. Any ounce that may have once been there was just squeezed, or perhaps they just copied him right out of the old stereotype handbook.
Name's Tex, little lady.
He serves an integral function in the story. Right away, he's representing for Achilles. He's displaying a lot of traits that make him seem like he's going to be the good support character.
Should have sent my boy in. You let that bastard kill 9 of our guys in a row. When my boy couldn't get him at any time. Nobody let anybody do anything.
And early in the movie, we start getting clues that there's maybe more to him and his story than meets the eye.
Athena asks him about one of his earlier fights, why he, I'm firing my lasers.
I'm firing my laser!
At the robot that he was fighting in the exact spot that he needed to fire his lasers at to destroy it, and he kind of brushes it off as luck.
It was a lucky shot, little lady.
Yeah, and so he actually uses that several times throughout the movie to try to deflect any question of how he managed to do it. Oh, I'm just a lucky guy. I'm one lucky son of a gun. Nothing else to it.
Caught him with a laser. that was a lucky shot, too.
And he's played kind of opposite Dr. Matsumoto. He doesn't receive a lot of characterization. He's kind of in the background. If you're not paying attention very closely, you might not even think the character has a name. But later on in the third act, his own suspicions of Tex Conway start to become a little more clear.
You took deliberate aim at the only vulnerable spot in that whole shield.
As he spent several scenes now being evasive over his management of the previous fight. And so it kind of comes to a head when Matsumoto says that he's not telling anybody about the new weapon specs except for the pilot on the day of the fight.
My boy didn't get a computer simulation, just goes at it cold?
Exactly.
The ultimate security measure.
So that way you can try to make sure that there's no information that's being spied and sold back over to the Confederation.
Tex Conway, in the beginning, is portrayed as this loyal to his country, good old boy, and we find out quickly that he is a double agent for the Confederation. Well, the problem with this is that his motivation in the movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
You're dumb.
He denies vehemently that he is a spy for about 2 seconds.
You're a Confederation agent.
Like hell.
And then says, yeah, I'm a spy, and I love it, ha ha ha.
You got me.
And then he shoots Dr. Matsumoto, and then later on, when Athena is powering up the robot and trying to figure out the weapons, they show the video of him explaining how the weapons work, and it cuts into a broadcast of Tex Conway killing Dr. Matsumoto, which outs the fact that Tex Conway is a spy to everyone. And instead of being like, I failed my country, I should be so ashamed, he's like, haha, I am a spy, and I'll see you in hell, and then he jumps out a window and dies. And it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, and the story comes to a screeching halt as face meets concrete.
Another problem this movie has is the ref squad. We're told in the beginning of the movie that
war is now outlawed.
So they have to fight this giant risk game where if one country wants a territory, they challenge the country that has that territory to a game of Robot Jox. And whoever wins gets to either keep or take that territory. So the refs have to be there to say who wins and who doesn't.
If you please.
The judgment is victory for the Confederation.
My first problem with it is, does the ref squad have like a base somewhere that's not connected to the rest of the world? To be true referees, they have to be not at all siding with one group or the other.
Right, totally impartial.
Do they have a ref base in space where they look upon the Earth?
Like a whole planet full of Foot Locker employees? Their competency has to be called into question immediately. In the beginning of the movie, Alexander has to fight Hercules, he beats him, and when he's told that he's won and that he should stand down, he instead opts to kill Hercules. And there are no repercussions, no punishment. The referees seem unable to offer any sort of sanctions or anything else that affects Alexander in any way. Later, he has his first fight with Achilles, and in that fight, he uses an illegal weapon.
The Confederation's new weapon, as used, was clearly in violation of Rule 7. Nothing classified as a long-range weapon may be employed during the final hand-to-hand combat period.
The trial is also headed by these referees rather than actual judges or so forth, and it is determined by them that although the deaths in the stand are irrelevant, and Achilles' motivation to save those 300 people is irrelevant, and that then the only thing left is that Alexander used an illegal weapon, they declare that the match is a draw rather than being in Achilles' favor, and it has to go on.
1 week from today, you will meet again in Death Valley for a rematch.
Yeah! 1 week, you're mine. I'll kill you dead.
So in the end of the movie, when Athena knocks out Achilles and takes over the Robot Jox and goes into the stadium, they call for the match to be thrown because Athena is not the pilot that they want in the Robot Jox. And the referees say,
Your robot has taken the field. That constitutes a legal challenge.
It's not our problem. That's your problem.
Yeah, so Athena's fighting Alexander, and then Alexander beats her, and the refs are like,
Your opponent is unconscious. The battle is concluded.
Then Achilles shows up and says, I'm going to get in this thing and I'm going to kick your ass, and then they start fighting again. So the Confederation calls Alexander and says, hey, stand down, you need to not fight anymore because you already won.
Alaska's ours.
Yeah, and in a fit of rage, he stomps on the ref pod. And then Achilles' side calls up Achilles and says, you don't need to fight Alexander because Alexander just crushed the ref pod, and that immediately disqualifies him from winning, so you don't need to fight him either. And Achilles continues to fight Alexander, and that's the last battle in the movie.
The battle's over.
Not for me.
Alexander breaks so many rules, and the refs totally turn a blind eye. And it's only when Alexander crushes the ref pod that things get really serious. But they don't show us the aftermath where Did the Confederation win Alaska? Did the market win Alaska? Is the whole match a draw? Are they both going to be fired from being Robot Jox because they basically broke every rule in the book?
Right, and with that, the Gen Jocks have already proven how ineffective they are in combat by being easily defeated by the regular Jocks. So are they going to continue? The whole thing is kind of thrown up in the air, and they just kind of they put the ending on the two pilots giving each other the thumbs up. They apparently have given up being Robot Jox. They're going to be movie reviewers from here on out, and they both give Robot Jox a thumbs up.
The law says I cannot serve anyone who is drunk. And you've got to admit you are one drunk guy.
The first robot battle was very short. They showed just the end of it, where Alexander defeats Hercules. So there's -1 points for the market. The second battle is Achilles versus Alexander. Alexander gets in a cheap shot at the end, which Achilles tries to deflect with his robot body. And so that's -1 point again, -2 points. The third match, Athena hijacks the Robot Jox to fight Alexander, and she gets her ass whooped. So that's -3 points already for the market. And then Achilles gets into the Robot Jox and flies into space for no discernible reason, where he gets shot at with missiles and he crash lands onto the planet. So that's -4 points to the market. And in the end, he gets chopped up with a dick saw in the end, which makes him abandon his Robot Jox altogether, which is -5 points. And actually, in the end, he defeats Alexander's Robot Jox by using his own fist against him, which is actually, I would say, a plus point for the Confederation, because it was their technology which defeated themselves. But I'm going to use that as a negative point, giving them -6 points overall for the movie.
Actually, it's -7, because when you look back, they refer to Tex Conway's fight in a previous era, not shown in the movie. They talk about how his mech was completely inferior to the opponent's mech, and so they just kind of out and out say that they had inferior mechs. So now I'm going to make it 7.
So it's -7 points to the market. I don't think that we should really give any to those dirty Ruskies.
No, they don't deserve any of our pity or any of our admiration.
So Trev, what are your final thoughts on this movie?
Well, I think that this movie is a real victim of development hell. Principal production for the movie finished in 1987, and over the course of 3 years that it took them to finish it, put it together, and when it was released in 1990, of course, with the heavy Soviet versus America theme in this movie, and the end of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, everything was really cooling off. There wasn't really high tension anymore.
Communism is just a red herring.
And so, for that reason, and the fact that amidst the release of this movie, we also had Home Alone, Dances with Wolves, Predator 2, Rocky 5, with all these other movies coming out at the same time, it kind of got buried. There wasn't really a lot of interest. And now, watching it from where we're standing here in 2013, the Cold War feeling of the film falls even deader.
You make my drink taste like blood.
What about you? What do you think?
I agree 100% with everything that you just said. I think that overall it's a fun throwaway movie. It's worth a watch, I guess. I could see why it got buried amongst all those movies, and I could also see, even if it opened with pure dreck out in the theaters, how it still probably wouldn't do all that well. It really seems like a lot of things were shoehorned into this movie that really didn't need to be there. If they had cut out a few elements of the movie, then it would have been a stronger movie overall. But because so many things were trying to be represented in this movie, it really did become a mess of a movie, and I don't think that this will be at the top of anybody's list, even recalling it to compare it to Pacific Rim.
So, well, that about does it for Robot Jox. I'm Trev.
I'm Jake.
And thanks for watching.
Peanut butter disaster.